We have lots to discuss here in today's video, including lots more action from the Stanley Cup playoffs. We saw a big overtime game last night between the Panthers and the Leafs, and of course the Winnipeg Jets at home against the Dallas Stars in Game 2. Of course, more games on the schedule here tonight with the Canes Capitals and Oilers Vegas going at it here as well. Plus lots of NHL rumors for the offseason, including some updates on expansion. Could Houston and Atlanta both be looking at teams that may be announced later into the summer? We'll have a look at the latest intel there. And in the trade rumor front, we're going to take a look at the Buffalo Sabres and Byram, Marco Rossi out of Minnesota. Plus, is there any possibility we could see a major deal between the Rangers and the Canadiens involving two former first overall picks? We'll discuss that scenario coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we got lots to discuss here in today's video. And first, we're going to start with some playoff recaps. Another big night of NHL action last night. The Winnipeg Jets shut out the Dallas Stars 4-0. Playoff Hellebuck seemed to have disappeared, and regular season Hellebuck appears to be back, which is good news for Winnipeg. Certainly had a phenomenal performance last night, 21 save shutout. Of course, we saw big goals from Gabe Vilardi, a couple goals from Nick Ehlers, including an empty netter, as well as Adam Lowry with a big goal as well. Winnipeg had a really, really solid game last night in evening up that series of 1 apiece. Of course, the Florida Panthers got back into the series with the Toronto Maple Leafs here as well, with a big 5-4 overtime victory. Another game here where the Panthers keep coming, keep being able to put up goals. Joseph Woll, wouldn't say he had a bad game, but there was a couple of those goals he definitely would like to have back, and looked a little shaky at times, but I'm sure he'll bounce back and give the Leafs a good opportunity here in the next one, since it looks like Stolarz is still going to be out here for a while. A couple of goals from John Tavares. Matthew Nyes actually opened the scoring as well. Number 23, Matthew Nyes scored 23 seconds in. For those that like to have fun with numbers, I thought that was interesting. Morgan Rielly with another big goal as well. He's been pretty good for Toronto here in these playoffs. Barkov, Reinhart, Verhaeghe had some big goals as well, including Brad Marchand, the Leaf killer himself, getting the overtime winner. I mean, I know Marchand's had a lot of battles with Toronto over the years, being a longtime Bruin. He goes to Florida, where he continues to have the same effect here. So certainly the Panthers needed that. Obviously, the situation where Florida didn't have a good start to the game here again. Toronto got off to a good start. Florida battles back, but then Toronto gets it tied up, and then the Panthers win in overtime. So obviously, with the games down in Florida, 2-1 series, big difference from 3-0. And the next one's going to be that much more important as well. The Panthers can tie it up versus the Leafs pulling ahead 3-1. Again, major difference here in this series. Tonight's playoff action, of course, gets started a little bit earlier, which is nice for those, especially those of us on the East Coast, where it's not quite so late. But Washington, Carolina had a earlier start, 6 o'clock Eastern time, and Carolina and Freddie Anderson picked up a 4-0 victory there as well. So a big game from Carolina. It was kind of, to be honest, the first half of the game I thought was a little bit of a snoozer. Wasn't the most high paced. There was a lot of one and dones, dumping the puck, forecheck, get in and into the zone. Just really wasn't a lot of shots, a lot of high danger chances. As the game went on, the second half of the second period into the third got a little bit more interesting. But Carolina with a big victory there at home, taking a 2-1 series lead. And then tonight, of course, we get Edmonton versus Vegas. A couple of key things. Calvin Pickard is not in the lineup for the Oilers tonight. Apparently, he's dealing with some sort of injury that he suffered in the last game. Stuart Skinner is back in net for Edmonton. And on the Vegas side of things, it was looking like Braden McNabb wasn't going to play, but he did go out for warm-up and is in the lineup. So McNabb is in, even though they said he probably wouldn't be. And Pavel Dorofeyev is back as well, and Brendan Saad is out. So certainly, if you're an Oilers fan, or if you're cheering for Edmonton, or you want to see Edmonton win this series, you have to say some prayers. I think you got to hope Skinner's been going to be better than what he was early against LA, because that was some poor performances, which almost cost Edmonton the first round. If it wasn't for the team bouncing back, and of course Pickard picking up the game here in Game 3, we may not be in this conversation here right now. Some other news around the NHL today. We got word after hiring Joel Quenneville yesterday that the Anaheim Ducks are making further changes to their coaching staff, announcing today that assistant coaches Brent Thompson and Rich Clune would not be brought back for next season. So they will be on the move, and Joel Quenneville will have a say. No big surprise there in helping hire the next couple of assistant coaches to replace them on the staff. Now, as I mentioned, some speculation for the offseason. We'll start first, before we get into trade stuff, with some expansion talk. Now, there's been some more conversations, specifically after Sportsnet conducted an interview with one of the prospective owners that want to bring a franchise back to Atlanta. Of course, we know that would be the third time that the NHL has gone there, but in all fairness, I know the last time around, I can't speak too much for the first time because that was obviously before my time, but in the last go around, the Thrashers, the ownership there wasn't great. You need the right owners, the right building, the right locations. Like, all that stuff makes a massive difference. Like, I still firmly believe hockey can work in the desert in Arizona, but they've never been able to get the building in the right location and have the right owner who could really take that and make it successful. They've had such a bad string of just, I don't know, not good owners for that area at all. That's a big reason, in my opinion, why it's failed. So I'm not completely against going back to Atlanta for a third time. I mean, there are some other areas, and being Canadian, of course, I am a little bit, I think fair to say, a little biased to some of the Canadian markets, and I'd love to see like Quebec City get another opportunity. They've had the NHL arena built. They were told by the NHL years ago, if you ever want to have hope to get your team back, you need an NHL-ready building. And they went ahead and built it, and they have it there. And they still can't even seem to get a sniff at expansion. Of course, the price keeps going up, which, everything in the world goes up over time as well. But now it's probably out of reach. It's going to be such an expensive venture to get a expansion team in the NHL now that I don't know that Quebec City can do it anymore. So they may have to hope there's an opportunity for relocation. And after the Coyotes moved to Utah last year, there's nothing obvious to me where we're going to see that kind of scenario, at least not anytime soon. So it's really difficult to say. But the Sportsnet interview with Vernon Krause is one of the, there's multiple groups in Atlanta, but they probably are the leading one there. Local Georgia businessman, basically saying that they've made a lot of progress here, getting their ducks in a row to be able to go to the NHL and seek application for expansion. I know they're very close to being able to start on an arena. Everything's kind of falling into place there, which is good. And I know a lot of people seem to think that, based on the area where this new arena would be and this new ownership group, that they would stand a much better chance of being successful than the previous renditions like we saw with the Thrashers. Of course, we haven't heard anything in the last, nothing new here really on Houston, but still many people believe that Houston might actually be, a little higher and a little closer to getting an expansion team than Atlanta, and that there's probably going to be a case that when this comes through, and it could be later this summer. Now, it may not be. It could be a little bit later, but some people think that NHL expansion is a possibility to be announced sometime after the CBA. I think the NHL owners don't really want to have anything take place with expansion until the next CBA is done. Now, I know that the Players Union for sure were bringing this topic of getting a piece of the expansion money to the negotiations. I know we've heard the executive director make mention of that before, and it's something that the players would like to have it be considered like hockey-related revenue and be able to get a chunk of that money. For right now, when they expand and they get all this money, it's only divided up amongst the other owners. I know when there was a rule, though, for Vegas when they came in, I think you have to be in the league so many years before you get a chunk of that. So Vegas did not get any money off of the Seattle expansion money, but it lines their pockets. The players don't get anything off of it, right? So clearly they would like to see that. Now, I'm not sure if they're going to come to an agreement or not, but knowing that from what we've heard about the CBA talks going very well, and that there's optimism right now that they could have something to announce by the time we hit the Stanley Cup final, that's very, very good, and I suspect we would probably learn about that being one of the topics. Now, and then the expansion's probably not going to come until that's probably their bigger concern and topic right now. And then if we get 2 teams, it's probably going to be a scenario where they do one in the West, one in the East. They probably stagger them over at least a year or two, at least 1 year apart, for teams to be able to plan better for expansion drafts and all that, and kind of move forward. So, but obviously everything's moving forward that way. Bettman was asked about it, said there was no timeline. Just all kind of said the same thing he normally has. There's been lots of interest, no timeline, but he did go on to say a lot of good things about Atlanta. So I think that they're very fond of the idea, and I really do see Houston and Atlanta getting teams. Just a matter of when we see that happen. Wouldn't be surprised if that's maybe a July or August type of announcement, but it could be a little bit later. We'll have to wait and see. Now, on to some offseason trade speculation. I know I come across a couple of things today. One, we know that there's a lot of speculation that Minnesota might move young centerman Marco Rossi this offseason. He's due a new contract based on how they deployed him in the playoffs. Even though he's been fairly productive for them, I don't know that they really see a big future with him as a top 6 center for them, and I think they'd like to get a different type of player in that kind of spot. He's a little bit undersized, but he's been productive here so far, making some good strides here in the last couple of years in his productivity and what he can do. So it's widely expected that the Minnesota Wild are going to explore trading him probably before they ever sign him to a contract and see what they can do. Now, one team that's been coming up here, as we talked about Montreal maybe being an option the other day. Obviously, they're looking for a number 2 centerman. But Montreal, again, they already have a lot of smaller players. So I'm not sure that, he'd be right at the top of their list. There might be some other guys they might look to first. But Pittsburgh's another team that's come up. We know that obviously they have, some veterans there like Crosby and Malkin who are not going to be there forever. They need to start, bringing in young guys, which they've done. Kyle Dubas has done a pretty good job at accumulating draft picks and to some degree, a decent amount of younger players. And that's going to continue, and this could be another piece in the puzzle there. There's speculation. We know Crosby's probably going to play for a few more years, but Malkin is rumored to play one more year and either retire or head to the KHL. So, his role could be greatly expanded upon as early as one more season. So we'll see what happens, but expect Pittsburgh to at least be checking in and be one of the teams in the mix there on Rossi, which makes sense. I saw an article, too, suggesting that Chicago may be a player for Bo Byram. We talked in the last couple of days how he's changed agencies, now rep by Darren Ferris of Cortex Hockey. We know he tends to drive a hard bargain and really known for dragging things out with his clients and get what he wants. We know that there's speculation around that he's already kind of moved out, cleaned out his place, and is expecting a trade. We knew the Sabres were very likely going to trade one of their top defensemen this offseason, and considering that Byram needs a new contract, it makes sense that he could be the guy. We know he wants to be having a bigger role and certainly pay like a top number 1 defenseman on where he's at. A team like Chicago could be a team where he actually could be given that role, considering how young that team is. He could really be a top guy immediately. Now, the article I found suggesting this was saying that maybe Byram plus other things could be factored in here. Maybe they could try to pry away the 3rd overall pick from the Blackhawks in that type of trade. Like, for example, Byram and I know it actually suggested Peterka, where they both need new contracts. I was like, why would Buffalo give up both of these guys and get the 3rd overall pick? Yes, they'd get a really good player, but this team in Buffalo wants to win now. So, and I'm not sure Chicago is going to be willing to give up that pick. I mean, maybe, but they're going to get themselves a really good player, right? There's a pretty good chance here they could get, whether it be, Misa, Martone, or Haggins. One of those 3 guys are extremely likely going to be there. And they're all guys that can be a really good top 6 forward for them, in which they could use, another one, especially if they can get a guy like Misa, depending on who goes 1 and 2, right? I just don't know that it's going to take a lot to pry that away from Chicago. I don't know if Byram and Peterka would be what they would want, but at the same time, Peterka could be a great player to play with Bedard, and maybe they go that route. But I just don't know that Buffalo would do that. I really don't. I don't think it makes sense for the Sabres unless they turn around and flip that pick to another team for another player that they really like better or something. But in all honesty, does Byram make sense for Chicago? He does. If that is a case that we could see that, I don't see it being a bigger deal. I don't see it involving the third overall pick. I think it would probably involve some other players. They have a lot of players that are either NHL ready or very close that maybe the Sabres like. But the thing is, like, as much as he makes sense for Chicago, like I said, Buffalo, they can't take steps back. They're done rebuilding. They need to get into the playoffs yesterday. I just don't see a scenario where they trade for futures. So, again, unless they take those futures and immediately flip them to a third team, it just doesn't make sense for me. So, we'll see. Now, there's also discussion through TVA Sports. And this was just for discussion. It's not necessarily rumored to be something that's actively being discussed, but it involves, of course, a couple of former first-rounders in Lafreniere and Slafkovsky. Now, when it comes to Lafreniere, we've seen articles from the New York Post and New York media suggesting that the Rangers could trade him this offseason. I think after getting that big contract last year that we saw a major dip in his production. He hasn't been able to take off and sustain it yet. So, it makes sense that they might consider that. We know the Rangers and Chris Drury are going to probably be a very active team, and they could make a lot of moves. We know that there's, guys like Zibanejad and Kreider might be on the way out. We know that, Keandre Miller might be a guy to get moved. We know that, Lafreniere's name has been out there. Like there's a lot of moving parts there. They're not all going to go, but it is a possibility that some of these bigger names in New York could be traded, and that we have enough reason to believe that they're definitely available for the right price. So I guess the discussion here is, if you're Montreal, do you try to bring home, because they obviously would like to get another top six forward. Now they probably would prefer a centerman. However, having said that, it's been a while since they've had a French-Canadian superstar player, and I think that something for that franchise is important, especially for the fan base, if they had that, and he has that potential still young enough that doesn't make sense for them to try to trade for Lafreniere. And the discussion was, well, the Rangers are probably going to ask for a guy like Slafkovsky if they do that. So if you're talking to the Rangers about Lafreniere and they ask for Slafkovsky, do you make that move or not? So it's really just for discussion. Now, a couple other quick tidbits here. Remember, Jeff Gorton was with the Rangers when they drafted Lafreniere. So, of course, not to say that he's a genius for making that pick. I think most teams would have picked him because he was the consensus number one overall selection. They were very fortunate to have the ping pong balls go their way in that draft lottery, which put them there. Of course, LA went to number 2 and got Quentin Byfield. And then you got Timmy Stützle went number 3 to Ottawa. And, looking at how things have went so far, did those two top teams really get the best player in the draft? Right now, it doesn't look that way. I mean, they're good players, sure. Are they the best in the draft? No, and that's just always the risk with how things go, right? Not to take anything away from Lafreniere, he still hasn't peaked, in my opinion. So I understand the interest level of Montreal, why that would be something you would consider. I guess a couple of things here. Like I said, you get the connection of Gorton to Lafreniere. You got looking at the contract extension that Slafkovsky did and that Lafreniere did. Obviously, they are similar type contracts. So from a money and a term standpoint, there's not a ton of difference. It wouldn't be that complicated from that standpoint. Slafkovsky, again, like Lafreniere, showing improvements, but you don't always get it consistently. And looking at his numbers, like he still hasn't anywhere, I don't think, has peaked yet either. So it's definitely risky because they're very different types of players. Slafkovsky is a much bigger player, would be more of a power forward type of guy, whereas you get Lafreniere is not small, but he's just an average size guy, more of a playmaking type winger who can score is what he was drafted as. So, clearly different kind of players. It's not exactly what Montreal needs. So if you're trading Slafkovsky for Lafreniere, we know that the big talker of Montreal needing a number 2 center would, if you take a look at their top 6 mix-up, right? You got Caulfield and Suzuki, great playmaker and scorer together there. You've got Slafkovsky, who's been on the other side of that. Then you get a line 2 right now. It's been you get Demidov, who should be given every opportunity there next year. Right now, Alex Newhook would be that center, but he's probably not best suited for that spot. Line A didn't really fit with Demidov, but there's also a small sample size. If Line A stays with Montreal, does he have that shot? Do you put if you trade Slafkovsky for Lafreniere, he probably goes on the top line with Caulfield and Suzuki, you would think, right? And he still doesn't solve the situation for that second line, making it better. Maybe that's a completely separate move, but I don't know. The debate was kind of unsure if you would do that. I mean, like I said, lots of interest to bring Lafreniere in, but if it costs Slafkovsky, do you make that move? I mean, Lafreniere is a little bit older, arguably a little further along in his development, but because of that, you might think, well, Slafkovsky might have a higher ceiling. We don't know yet, because if you look at what they've each accomplished by the same age levels, okay, and plus he's already been there for a while. He's already been used to playing with Caulfield, Suzuki. It's only going to probably get better. I don't know. I don't know if you make that deal if you're Montreal. I think if you're the Rangers, you definitely. If I'm Chris Drury, and I say, and Montreal calls me about Lafreniere, and be like, okay, well, it would take Slafkovsky to get it done, and they say, okay, I'm like, okay, or I'm getting that done. If I'm Chris Drury, to be honest, it gives me a different kind of player, bigger, stronger, more physical. I would probably make that move if I'm the Rangers. If I'm Montreal, I don't know. I like the idea of having Lafreniere, but I'd be worried that you're trading the player who might have the higher ceiling, and it's just a little bit too early to tell. Maybe long-term, they're very similar production-wise, and it's kind of a wash. It's just a difference in style of play. I don't know. So if you're Montreal, and we know, if you're a Habs fan especially, would you be in favor of that trade or not? Give me your opinions from both sides of the equation here. Certainly seems like a debate worth having. Knowing Lafreniere is possibly available, if you're Montreal and that's the asking price, do you pull the trigger? Let me know in the thoughts in the comment section. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.